So many species live in very close association with another species. And we call this sort of relationship symbiosis. Symbiosis comes in three sort of categories that we talk about: parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. So you're probably familiar with parasitism, like we talked about earlier. So in a parasitic relationship, there's one organism that is benefiting in some way, and another organism which is actually being harmed by this relationship. What do we call the organism being harmed? Prey. No, not we don't call it prey, not the host. So the host organism is injured in some way. And the parasite itself is benefiting. We've talked about some types of parasites earlier in the year when we were talking about taxonomy. Tapeworm, for example. A digestive tapeworm gets into an animal's body or a person's body, finds its way into their digestive tract, into their intestine usually, and attaches there. What does the parasitic tapeworm gain out of this relationship? It gets food, it gets energy. When the animal eats and digests food, the parasite absorbs some of that, and that's its nutrition. How is the host harmed by this tapeworm? Carter?
What's the peanut energy is going to the house?
Yeah, it's being robbed of energy, that's one thing. Also, the buildup of these worms as they grow and reproduce, they can interfere with the movement of food through the digestive tract. There are lots of different types of parasitic worms. Some can live in the circulatory system, in the blood, in the arteries, and in the heart. Some types of pork roundworm makes its way to the brain, where the worm lays eggs, eventually kill a person. Some live in the lymphatic system, that cause elephantiasis, which we saw earlier in the year. So there's lots of different types of parasites. Flea that burrows into the skin of a dog, living off of blood that it digests, that's another parasitic relationship.
So how would the tapeworm get into a person?
Depends. So a person can get a parasite in various ways. Sometimes by drinking water that has larvae or eggs of the parasite. Sometimes by ingesting the parasite. For example, that pork roundworm, if there happened to be a pig that was infected, it goes through several stages in its life cycle, one of which is in the pig. If that pig was infected with the pork ascaris, roundworm, and the worm in the pig was slaughtered and somebody ate it as pork, and it was not cooked to the proper temperature, there could be still some parasitic eggs or worms in there that a person could digest, and then they can become infected. Some parasites can get through the skin. Walking through an infected stream could allow parasites to get into a person's skin and infect them in that way. So there's a lot of different ways parasites can get into a person. So that's parasitism. Now, most of the time, do parasites kill their host quickly? No. Why not? Stephanie? Yeah, they need that. And so the longer the parasite can keep the host alive, the longer it's going to have a sustained source of energy, food. They may eventually die and the parasite may have to find another host, but less beneficial. All right, another type of relationship is called mutualism. In a mutualistic relationship, both organisms benefit. They both gain something positive out of this relationship. An example would be the Nile crocodile and the Egyptian plover. So So this is a Nile crocodile. It's a ferocious predator. Could even kill people. It's a carnivore. Lives in the Nile River Valley. And it actually, this is the Egyptian plover. The Nile crocodile opens up its mouth, allows this small bird to come into its mouth, walk around, peck around in its mouth, and walk right out, never injured. They have a mutualistic relationship. What does the Nile crocodile gain out of this symbiotic relationship? Carter? Yeah, it gets its teeth cleaned, like free dental cleaning, free dental hygiene. This bird pecks around, cleans food out of its teeth so that they're clean and wouldn't get infected and so forth. How about the Egyptian plover? Grady?
Gets food when it doesn't need the hunts.
Yeah, it gets food. That's what its food source is. Those little bits of food it's picking out of the crocodile's teeth, that's what it's eating. So they have a mutually beneficial relationship, mutualism. You're all familiar with this fish and this anemone. What type of organism is an anemone based on our study of taxonomy earlier in the year? Get those hamsters running. Katie? What? Yeah, it's an cnidarian. So, a clownfish and a sea anemone have a mutualistic relationship. The sea anemone is an cnidarian. It has stinging cells on these tentacles. Anyone remember the name of the stinging cells? Nematocysts. They shoot into their prey, stunning it, allowing them to consume it. However, the clownfish is immune to those stinging cells. Has a thick layer of mucus that protects it from these nematocysts. It lives within the tentacles of this anemone. What does the clownfish gain? How is it benefiting? Olivia?
It's like a shelter.
It's sheltered, it's protected. Most fish are not going to mess with it because they don't want to get stung by the tentacles of this anemone. There are some animals that will eat it, but yeah, so the clownfish can sort of hide out there. It's protected. What does the anemone gain out of this relationship? Aiden?
Food? Like when something tries to go with it?
Yeah, so the clownfish will lure in small fish sometimes that the anemone can then kill and eat. Waste from the anemone can be used by waste from the clownfish can be used by the anemone. Right? The anemones clean up inside of the clownfish clean up inside of the anemone, consuming like dead tentacles and little bits of stuff like that. So,
You can go commensals,
you do? What is it?
like two organisms benefit equally. Like,
That would be mutualism. Do you think commence limit is when both organisms are harmed?
no.
Yeah.
No, because why would it
Yeah, why would
doing the relationship?
Exactly, it's not. Because why would two organisms have a relationship if they're both getting harmed? They wouldn't. Evolution would not favor that sort of relationship. Commensal is a relationship when one organism benefits, but the other is really not affected. It's not harmed, and it's not helped. It's sort of neutral. An example, this would be a barnacle living on a whale or a turtle. Barnacle is a small little mollusk, attaches to surfaces. Sometimes they attach to whale skin or a turtle shell and hitch a ride, getting transportation, filtering food out of the water as it moves around, but it doesn't harm the whale in any way. It doesn't harm the turtle. A robin building its nest in a tree. It doesn't affect the tree. It doesn't help it, doesn't hurt it. Those are examples of commensals. Dean?
Wouldn't that fish that can like attach to a shark and then leave also be
Well, like
considered?
they both benefit.
Yeah, I think a shark also benefits from that as well. Yeah.
It's food.
All right. This is another example. I talked about this earlier in the year. What are these? What is this picture showing?
Oh, it's just
Grace?
The jawless fish.
Yes, this is a jawless fish called
haggling.
No.
I don't know,
Big red one.
A lamprey. These are lamprey. They are jawless fish. They have, remember I showed you pictures in taxonomy, they have that round mouth, their tongue has teeth on it, they attach to the fish and they bore a hole into the side of
do
it.
they have eyes?
Yeah. What?
Is that a parasite?
Yeah, they're big. They're like the size of an eel. It's a parasite. They bore a hole in the side of the fish, they consume its blood, stay attached for a while, harming the fish. This is a parasitic relationship. We used to have a really neat video that showed a few of the examples. I'm looking for another copy because it got taken down. This is a goby and a shrimp. And the shrimp is basically blind. And it burrows and makes a very elaborate, large sort of tunnel system in the sand at the bottom of the water. The goby lives in that tunnel with the shrimp. Okay? And when the shrimp comes out, the goby goes with it. The shrimp is basically blind. So the goby keeps watch for any predators. The shrimp keeps its antennae in contact with the goby. If the goby backs up and goes back into the burrow, the shrimp goes with it. So they both benefit. This is mutualism. This is a barnacle. These are all barnacles attached to this turtle. Doesn't affect it. It doesn't harm it. But it is benefiting. The barnacle is. So this is commensalism.
What?
This is a polar bear. Obviously, what do you notice about its body?
It's really skinny.
Yeah, it's basically starving to death.
Looks like a dog.
Starving to death because of an intestinal parasite.
Why is there no snow?
Because in the spring it's.
Yeah, it's not.
We're not in the North
It's
Pole.
living in like Taiga. It's fine.
Some of the wine on it.
Polar bears live other than the North Pole too. This is a cool one, and if I get the video shows this as well. Certain types of hermit crabs will walk around the bottom of the ocean, pick up sea anemones, put them on their shell, and walk around with the anemone on their shell. They will put 2, 3, or 4 anemones all on their shell to help protect them from predators.
Makes it look so. That's
Lots of birds, like on these birds on the water buffalo, they basically pick off little insects and stuff from the water buffalo, cleaning up its fur. This is, again, mutualism because they're both benefiting. The birds get a meal, water buffalo gets clean fur. This is the video that does work.
Ah, come on. What nerds?
Okay, a couple last things to talk about this section of the economy.
Nerds. They shouldn't have it monetized.
When we describe an ecosystem, we will often talk about various organisms' niche within that ecosystem. We sometimes say the niche is like the role an organism plays in an ecosystem. And when we describe an organism's niche, right now, sort of all the factors about it. What does it do? When does it eat? What does it eat? Where does it eat? What times of the day is it active? When does it reproduce? All of these factors about the organism make up its niche. And also, as we know, the habitat of an organism is the area in which it lives. So what do you think would happen if 2 organisms had the same niche and the same habitat? Pardon?
They would, what, reproduce?
Well, they're different species. If they're 2 different species, they wouldn't be able to reproduce. So,
They would form a mutualistic relationship.
possibly, but probably almost the opposite. Dean?
They would form symbiotic relationships.
No. Imagine the situation. I have,
Wait,
okay, now we're getting there. They may not technically fight, but another term we can use.
they starve each other?
You're getting closer.
They would like take each other's food and like drink.
Yes. What? They would compete.
Yeah.
The word we use in ecology is competition.
They need like water, like fill the water.
So all organisms often share the same habitat, but they usually do not share the same niche as another species within that habitat. For example, think about a forest lake ecosystem. You have white-tailed deer, you have herons, both living in the same habitat, but they're different niches. The white-tailed deer browses the vegetation for energy. The heron fishes along the shore. So they're different niches. However, what if you had another species of bird that also lives in the same habitat with the heron, that also hunts along the shoreline? What would happen in that situation? They'd compete. They'd both be trying to get the same limited resource. And eventually what usually happens? One of them is better at competing, and one of them will survive, and the other either dies off or finds an alternate niche or an alternate habitat. Sharing the niche results in competition. How many people have a garden at their house usually? How many people's parents make them go out and weed the garden? How does that relate to this? You can think about this as an ecological concept, right?
Like the weeds will start like taking the water and the food from the soil before like the other plants can, and like or it's the other way around, and like one of them dies or like they have to remove one of them.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have a garden, you plant your tomatoes. You don't weed the garden. Eventually you'll get some small plants and grasses and other herbaceous plants growing. And they're in the same habitat, obviously. They're both growing in your garden. And they have the same niche. They both need water. They both need sunlight. They need the same nutrients out of the soil. And because they have the same niche, they will compete. And one's going to win out. Often weeds are fast growing, can use resources very quickly. Usually it's your plants that you want to grow that are the losing end of that. And by weeding, you're eliminating competition. By pulling out all those weeds, you're eliminating the competition for resources and allowing your plants to get as much of those resources as possible. Finally, our last topic in this section, succession. If you imagine a forest around here. Let's say a mature forest in our area consists of hardwoods, mainly beech trees, birch trees, and maple trees, and the animals that sort of go along with those trees. If you imagine that forest, if a forest fire completely burned it to the ground, there were no living organisms left, just charred wood and soil. Would it stay that way forever?
No.
You go back to that site 1 year after the fire. What would you expect to find 1 year later? Francesca?
Like the same trees and plants that were burned, but just not as large.
Okay.
Like
Can you find trees 1 year later? Like same beech and birch and maple trees? Probably not. Grady?
Blue trees would be fun.
Trees? Maybe not within a year. Carter?
Maybe find a town.
What?
Maybe find a town, because sometimes after forest fires, people.
Well, okay, I'm thinking about just a natural ecosystem. Katie?
Small bushes.
Maybe not bushes after 1 year. You're not going to go from bare soil to bushes in a single year. Priscilla?
Like a small plant.
Tiny little plants. What things we would call what?
Grass.
Weeds and grass. They can take hold quickly, grow quickly, and establish some sort of plants. All right, how about 5 years later? Maybe some small saplings, maybe some shrubs, some bushes, things like that. How about 10 years later?
Bigger trees.
Bigger trees. Probably not the same species though. The first trees to colonize an area are not those large beech, birch, maple trees. They're things like aspens maybe, or oaks and things like that can grow a little quicker. Eventually, how about 150 years later?
Big trees, big bushes, big.
Which trees?
Trees.
Probably the same as you originally started with. In our area, that's what we call our climax community. After a disturbance, given enough time, our ecosystem reconstitutes that beech, birch, maple forest. Different parts of the world, it may be different ecosystems. If you go north of here, it may be a spruce fir forest. If you go up in the mountains of the Adirondacks, it would be spruce fir. Okay? If you go out to the Midwest, a mature ecosystem is a grassland. If you go to the Southwest, it's a desert. If you go to parts of Africa, it might be a savanna. If you go to equatorial regions, it might be a rainforest. So it depends on the climate and the conditions in those areas, what the eventual ecosystem would be. Dean?
What happens to the trees that were there originally? How you said that's when trees and stuff.
How would they what?
What would happen to them?
They'd be so decomposed over time.
And they'd make the soil better.
Yeah. All right, so this process is called succession. An ecosystem changing and maturing over time. The very first organisms that can start to grow, we call them pioneer organisms. Just like who are the pioneers of the American West?
The weird guys that
Who really was? Who's the
The first Europeans to move into western areas, right?
You should be socialized.
Yeah, there are lots of people, you know, but the people that started making their way westward were the pioneers, even though there were plenty of native people here before that.
Yeah.
And an ecosystem, usually it's small, fast-growing things. There can even be a pioneer community that starts on bare rock, things like algae, mosses, lichens. And then we have the climax community, which is sort of the mature, stable stage of a certain area. In our area, like I said, it's a beech, birch, maple forest. If farmers stopped tending to their fields and just left it as plowed earth, succession will take place pretty quickly. You'll start to see grasses that season. Smaller woody plants and shrubs and small flowering trees, larger trees, eventually reaching back to the climax. All right, any questions? Yes, you're done with our notes. You could come in at lunch today. You could come in during study hall to work on your skeletons.